Newsflash LT, the 2016 Wellness Summit is confirmed.
Pop it in your diary and get your tickets now at the super early bird rate. Be there on September 10th and 11th in Melbourne with 1,000 other like-minded wellness enthusiasts. And for a limited time, purchase your ticket at this incredible rate.
Up until Christmas Day, 5 Wellness Summit tickets are yours for the price of 2. That's better than 2 for 1. That's 2.5 for 1. Bring a leg, bring an arm, bring your wellness tribe for less than $120 per ticket for a never-seen-before format of the summit.
And even better, every ticket purchased before Christmas goes into an incredible draw to win 1 ticket to the 2016 Wellness Breakthrough. I cannot believe we're actually giving this away. It's worth $3,000.
Get excited, people. Get very excited to get access to the biggest and best wellness summit ever and enter this special Christmas draw. Go to thewellnesssummit.com.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today's podcast is brought to you by Heartspace, who create beautiful jewels and candles and yoga clothing by Kim. And she's just a gorgeous soul, and she sponsored our retreat recently. So a big shout out to Heartspace. And you can find her on Instagram and also on Facebook. So
and that's Heart, H-A-R-T.
It is.
Space. Yes, and she's beautiful. So crystal candles, jewellery, which is this beautiful crystal range, and certainly gorgeous designed yoga tops. So if you need any of that jazz, check her out.
Check her out. And so today's topic is a juicy one, I think, isn't it? So we're going to be talking about how to get that spark back, and specifically how to fall back in love with your partner or your husband. And it's come about because there's been a couple of whisperings around me from women who've sort of had the babies, and you know, they've kind of got past that infant stage and they've got that little bit more independent. And then these mothers are getting to the point of going, okay, well, who am I now? And am I even the person that I was? Is the person that I'm with the person that I'm supposed to be with? Are we even on the same page anymore? You know, how has parenthood, you know, shaped us? Is this all that I want? Is this everything that there is? And so I really thought it was worthwhile for us to unpack this topic, because I think, you know, like any relationship, the one with your partner can sometimes be the most beautiful and enriching, but also the most challenging. And I remember, you know, back when I was engaged, and I remember kind of even having to kind of give myself some therapy around that process of getting prepared for marriage. And I remember reading something that said, you know, you have good years and bad years. And I thought it was a little bit like, oh, that's a bit, you know, depressing. But what it was really trying to say was about that idea of having seasons. You know, like you have seasons in your relationship. And, you know, there's so many tools and things that you can do to reawaken that. So that's what I really want to talk about today.
I love it. I think you should just keep going. Just keep going. You're on a roll. Okay,
so I'm on a roll. So I think with this whole idea, so I guess this concept of falling out of love comes about because we start to see that we have more differences than similarities with a person. So we start to see that we don't have common interests anymore. We don't seem to be attracted to that person anymore. And they just no longer float our boat. And often this comes about because you're comparing your partner to somebody else.
Or a book.
Or a film. Or, you know, what's that book? You know, 50 Shades of Grey. What's that done for marriages? I don't know. I haven't read it.
Or Twilight, maybe.
Yeah, or Twilight. But really, you know, like I think, get challenged because we're comparing that person closest to us to some ideal that we have. You know, expecting that person that we love to be something that we're not. And then when they don't fulfill this ideal version of them that we have in our head, then we're going to then judge them and they fall short of that. And then we're almost like looking for a problem. You know, looking for them to not step up. Which is futile, right? Because as soon as you start to look for that, that's what you're going to keep seeing, and you're going to keep seeing them falling short, and not see when they are not see when they're giving to you, and perhaps sometimes, you know, even they're doing so much for you, and you want them to stop. Like you find that overwhelming; it's almost too much. So I think it's just a really, really interesting dynamic that so many couples can find themselves in. It's just, it's a breakdown of communication. It's a shifting in values and each person not kind of meeting the other person where they're at. And those things take talking, but they also take introspection, because so often we think the other person has to change, that there's something wrong with that person. But in reality, they probably haven't changed anywhere near as much as you think that they have. It's it's you who've changed. You've changed your perspective on something. Perhaps you've created a new interest area. Perhaps you're trying to redesign your life and you feel like that they're not fitting in with that. Often it's far more about what's going on with you than it ever is about them. And it's because you want to make something different of yourself, or, you're perhaps yearning for the way things used to be, that you're increasingly looking for ways that they're not fitting that anymore. I don't know, do you see this with, mums around you at school, like this challenge that they...
Oh, yeah, 100%. You see it everywhere. I've certainly travelled that in my husband and I have been together 15 years in February.
It was that long. Wow.
Yeah. We've been married for 10 in February.
Yeah, wow.
So that's a huge amount of time. 15 years.
So much to
and
travel
3
and
kids.
so much to grow in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've definitely journeyed the spectrum, which I imagine anyone in a long-term relationship
And I think anyone
has.
who has... It's funny, I was actually out last night at a hen's and this girl was talking to me about they've been having fertility challenges and... they're kind of getting ready to embark on IVF, but she's like, to be honest, like, we kind of got to a point where we're like, do we even want to be together anymore? Like, are we even on the same page on this stuff? Because that whole issue had forced such a divide between the two of them, and it had become such a challenge, that, big life events also do this to couples. Where you
They do. The baby's going to make you or break you, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that kind of concept. But I think it's beyond that. But I want you to keep going, and then I'm going to have a crack at it at the end. So I want you to keep going.
Oh, no, I'm nervous.
I'm liking your universal law stuff. I'm really liking that what you're saying is a lot of the shifts is what's happened internally for us, that now we're looking through a different lens at our partners as opposed to them having changed or not fitting in anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and there'll be a little bit of both inevitably, and perhaps they are making a change. Perhaps, your partner has undergone a big shift, or they have a new interest in an area that you can't stand. Perhaps they now want to ride motorbikes and hang out with bikers, or I don't know, whatever. Yeah. And you're finding that that's really challenging, and you're feeling like, well, who are you now? I don't feel like I know you. You want to go and do all this stuff, but that's not me. That could be something that's happening.
Yep.
But I guess it's also to continue to ask yourself, what's happening, what kind of obstacle, what is this obstacle trying to teach me about myself? Like, what is this obstacle trying to teach me about my journey? Because, everything is our perception, and what's happening for us there's lessons in that for us. And so it's about how can we use it. It's not necessarily to stay when you're, desperately unhappy, but unless you look at what button it's pushing for you, it's not going to make it go away.
It'll just come in a different form.
It'll come in a different form, or, you'll have another relationship and the same kinds of dynamics will come up.
Do you know what else I really liked is in our Family Dynamics podcast, the concept I really got from you in that was universally as a unit, whether it's just a couple or it's a family, we're never lacking. So the things that, like my husband, I think I might have said that, my husband's, in inverted commas, laziness is what drives me crazy. So there could be a pile of dishes in a house that's trashed, but he just wants to lie on the couch and watch TV at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I'll be sitting there going, are you kidding me? But then I really got when you were saying is that, okay, but equally, there's two ways of looking at it, right? So where are you lazy? Because it'll be in a completely different area of life that you're obviously not recognising or not owning, because that's triggering the laziness label is triggering you. So where are you not owning your laziness? And conversely, on a universal level, is he has to be lazy for you to be productive and busy. That I couldn't be as productive and busy and whatever as I am were he not able to hold the opposite space, the polar opposite for me. Because we couldn't both consume the same amount of busy energy. It would never work. So for us to work so well, we have to counterbalance.
Exactly.
Almost.
And it's fun. It's exactly right, because I was talking to my mentor on this week the other day, and he was saying to me, does your husband want to do this next course, or this course that you've done? And I said, oh, no, he's not interested at all. He's like, oh, that's great, because then you can, because it's an energy thing. It's an energy thing within the family. If one person is diving in and learning constantly and wanting to kind of deepen their knowledge in a certain area, the other person generally unconsciously steps up to kind of fill the void that you might be creating in terms of going off and doing that. You know, so yes, you do have some superpower couples who are highly ambitious, but invariably they might then have help, like hired help to take care of some of the other stuff. But for most of us, that's not a reality. So instead what happens is, you know, the mother might go off and study something or learn something, and so therefore the father might step up, or another family member, perhaps, you know, a grandparent might step up. Or conversely, as the father gets, you know, more intense at work and things like that, the mother will be more hands-on in the home and just kind of know that she just needs to pick up her game a bit more to support him because he's got some big work stuff going on. And this is just constantly always happening, these shifts. And yes, there'll be tension with it. Yes, there might be blow-ups, but it's part of the whole. It's part of creating that whole that functions.
And for me, it's the gratitude. So as opposed to being angry about the laziness, I can be grateful for the laziness because it allows me to be the way that I want to be.
What does this give me? You know?
Yes, what are the benefits? So I really liked that. So I think that's one thing to ponder when you're looking at that.
And I think too, you know, like anything, because, you know, I've certainly gone through moments, like I've been with my husband since I was 18, so I'm 31 now, so that's a long time. I don't know how many years that is, but we've been married for 5 years. And like there's been totally like seasons where I've gone, what am I doing? You know, like, is this what I want? Like, you know, and like I think anyone will say that they've had that same experience, and I highly doubt that they haven't, because it's what happens in order to grow, and particularly to grow with someone through, you know, your 20s, which is, you know, a really big part of your life. There's going to be that, you know, that those difficult times where you start to question who you are and, you know, where you're supposed to go and can you grow together. And like, I'm so enormously grateful that he is who he is and I am who I am, and that we've grown together like we have. But, you know, the biggest thing that I keep coming back to, and what I'm studying in the work that I do, is that the power of being grateful for who that person is and what they give you in their life. Because that, we talk about it all the time, but that's the number one healer. And when you're in judgment, or when you're resentful, or when you're in any of those negative states, you're not grateful. You don't actually have the capacity to have a grateful heart. And we have so much to be grateful for. And even people who we think are awful, or we have a massive judgment on, they still do things that we can be grateful for. You know, they still offer things to us, even if they might, you know, give us challenges that we don't want. They still offer us something to help us to grow, and that's something to be grateful for. And, you know, same thing with partners. You know, sometimes the partner who can be really difficult and perhaps not support you like you think he should, helps you to fire up and stand on your own 2 feet and, you know, get more independence. You know, to not be dependent on that person, because, you know, you get too much support in a relationship, and then, you know, it's like that whole...
It stops the growth.
It does.
It's the fine line between support and challenge.
It is. It's like that, you know, you hear of people who, like, let themselves go, you know, in marriage, you know, and they just can't, you just kind of drop your bundle and you get comfortable, and that's like a metaphor for what can happen if the other person's constantly supporting you.
Yeah.
You know, you don't go and learn that thing that you really wanted to learn, or you don't, you know, push yourself to, you know, get that promotion, or you don't really make a huge effort to stand up for your kids at school because that's what you know is right. Because you're kind of getting supported to let yourself off the hook. So you actually need that challenge. And if your partner's bringing that, well, it's, okay, well, how is this challenge that I'm finding so difficult to bear, you know, of service to me? You know, what can I take from this?
What is it trying to get me to own?
Yeah.
Is really the question, isn't it? Which is as much for the traits that drive you bonkers. So owning those traits, or where are you not owning those traits? Where are you those things?
Yeah. Because the stuff that drives you bonkers is the gold. Because it keeps happening for a reason.
It's your shadow side being hidden and wanting to be expressed or owned.
But the thing is, you know, and I do this, and I you know, I, in inverted commas, should know better. But, you know, when you're in those states, you just want them to go away. Like, when you're feeling really highly angry or charged, or your buttons are pushed, you just want to do what you can to distract yourself from feeling like that and move on to the next thing. But we all know that will just keep coming back, and someone else will push it. So when you can clear it, or when you can see what it is, like see the gold in it, it's really great. But in terms of the relationship thing, and in terms of how to fall back in love, it's about what is this person giving me? What is this person showing to me about myself? What do they bring to my life? What do they give to our children? How do they help me be more of myself? You know, what what's their bright light? You know, like often we will judge other people or judge our partners as, you know, like not being good enough or not being smart enough or not being handsome enough or, you know, whatever it is, not enough, the not enough spectrum that we all have. But that's just a judgment based on our own value system. You know, for a long time I used to like judge my husband for like liking certain cars, and they drove me nuts and I hated it. And, you know, and I just used to think it was these like bogan cars, like who even cares about these things? But that was just, but that's not fair, right? Like, because that's me trying to make him something. He's not like me trying to ask him to not like something that he loves. And that's just mean. But I could see that it was just my stuff. It was totally my stuff, and I had to hang up on it, and that was just...
You had to hang up on being a bogan.
Yeah, I had to hang up on being a bogan. I really did. And he pushed that bogan button for me.
Did you own your inner bogan?
I owned my inner bogan. I actually read a book at one stage called The Bogan Delusion, and didn't help me like bogans any less. But, anymore. But it was funny because it was totally like my thing, and my husband, he's not really a bogan at all. It was just his car thing. Of 1980.
Oh, come on, we're all a bit of a bogan.
Well, we are, aren't we? We are all a bit of a bogan. But it was funny, like, he picked me up on it sometimes with how judgy I used to get on different things. It was just my bogan phase I had to go through to own the inner bogan. But, you know, they'll push your buttons, right? And that was the button that he was pushing for me. And I was trying to, you know, like, as soon as you try and make someone into something that they're not, it would just disappoint you to no end. And, you know, you dim their light. You dim your own and you dim theirs by doing that.
That's really true, actually. You dim both. It's never just one, is it?
Yeah, because, you know, you start to create, even if you're not aware of it, you're creating an inner resentment towards yourself by trying to project yourself onto somebody else in that way and expect them to live outside of who they are. Because they just want to be loved and appreciated for who they are. That's all we all want. And... you know, you sell yourself short and you sell them short when you try to ask them to be anything but.
Okay, so we're going to try and take this energy down a bit. We just had a break because I said to Bridget, I'm feeling too flighty and I'm trying to be intimate here and I'm not feeling it. So I've just gotten on a candle and we're shifting the energy and doing a different breath.
It's very beautiful.
And Bridget just said to me, is this challenging? And I was like, well, no. And then I thought, no, this is a challenging topic, right? Because it's so vast, this topic, and there's so much depth. And if I really sit and think about this topic, I just feel like there's more and more stories and more layers, and you could talk about it till the cows come home, really.
Yeah.
So I kind of think I just want to take it a little bit. We've kind of touched on a little bit of universal laws and shadow work, which you could look back on our previous podcasts for more information on that. So let's take it a little bit more practically and a little bit deeper. And there's two ways I want to go with it, I think. One is, for me, when I think about how do I fall back in love with my husband, it's entirely different to just loving him. So I can say over 15 years that we've been together, I have always loved him, but I have not always been in love with him.
Gold. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because that feeling of being in love is desirous. I long for him. I want him near me and next to me. I want him to touch me. I want to touch and kiss him. I want to spend time with him. Whereas when I'm out of love with him, but still loving him, we just kind of function. And I don't really want him in my space. And I don't really want to be intimate. And, you know, take it or leave it, I'd probably rather hang with my girlfriends. Probably is pissing me off a bit too.
Yeah.
So how do you get back in love with your husband? I really get those stories. I've heard so many of those stories. I've had kids and I'm a different woman, or I've gone through these deep life processes and epiphany moments. And this is where I'm headed. And I just... he's not there. He's not that man for me. And what am I going to do with that? Because I thought this was the path that I had planned, right? Or I have kids with him.
Right? Like,
terrifying. It is genuinely terrifying. The prospect of my future could be something entirely different is genuinely terrifying. It's earth-shattering. But I think we go through these. I really loved your seasons comment. I love that word, because I think we go through these seasons of change as the shake-up. It's like the sand timer or whatever. It's almost like the sand you have to have something groundbreaking to create the sand and the dust to whirl around you, to figure out where it's going to resettle and reform that landscape and those foundations, because you can't ever stay on the same trajectory. You're always going to be shifting and changing and on this continuum of a dance together. And it's about how you approach yourself and your relationship through that sandstorm that I think makes the difference at the other end, about whether you're in love or you're just love. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I really do.
And I have said it to every time one of my friends has gotten married. I've, written something what I feel is profound to them that I could be brought to tears of gratitude, but I don't know if they ever really get it. But this is what I can say to you, is that after 15 years of being with the same man, I am more in lust and in love with him than what I ever thought was possible 15 years ago. Like, when I think about, being in my early 20s and thinking what the height of feminine power and orgasm and, lust was, it pales in significance to what I now know that to be. And that is the experience of making and breaking and falling out and in of love over 15 years with the same person. So I genuinely think, what do I even want to say here? I want to say there's two ways to look at this. For me, when I'm talking about being in love with your partner, it's, for me, exactly the same as being in love with yourself. Because generally, the women that I come across, that I meet, that come to me for consults, are equally out of love with themselves, almost on the same continuum as their relationship is demonstrating. Yeah. So when they want to get back in love and in lust and with their partner, what they're really also wanting underneath all of that is love and lust for themselves.
Because it's exactly right. Whenever you're wanting them to give, you think your partner needs to give you something, it's often because you're not giving that to yourself.
And often women, I find, go on this almost, I'm going to say it, almost this head fuck of, well, he's not touching me and he's not desiring me, so therefore I'm unattractive. And it's like this downward spiral that's going nowhere good. Yeah. But underneath all of that is needing the validation from another person that you're okay. But when you remove the need for him to fulfill you because you're able to know on a very deep level and feel and connect with your seductive powers, you would never second guess that. And that is what is attractive and seductive. When we've talked about this on other podcasts, what seduction and magnetism is. But that is about being in love with yourself. That it is not about being the most beautiful. It is not about having the best underwear, the best clothes, the best body, having no flabby bits or whatever. Because let me tell you, 3 kids down the track, my body is not a thing of what it was 15 years ago. But that has absolutely no correlation for how orgasmic my life is. Yeah. And how much love is in my life.
Well, there's a depth and richness that you couldn't have dreamt of then.
Could not.
And that heightens the sense of, I guess, lust for each other, because you've got that fabric that you've woven together.
Absolutely. But this is what I want to say also is, so when we're talking about falling in love with our husbands, what I'm also offering to women is that it needs to be, how is your connection to yourself? So often, before you even look at how do you strengthen your connection with your partner, is how do you strengthen your connection with yourself? Have Absolutely. I said it enough times and enough ways now?
No, but it's exactly right. That's the perfect starting point.
It's really, how comfortable are you with your body? How comfortable are you with your sexuality? How well do you know your pussy? Because let me tell you, there's a whole lot of shit you probably don't know.
Yeah.
And there's a podcast in that, Bridget, I've joked about it. We're going to call it the spiritual vagina, which was what one of my friend's husbands had joked about when she was coming over to have coffee with me. And this flippant conversation of, well, if you don't know what you're doing by now, then you've got what hope have you got? I thought that's so wrong because there's so much stuff about the vagina and our bodies that I never knew.
Some of it's still being discovered because nobody cared to look until quite
Exactly.
recently too.
But beyond even the sex, even beyond that, is just what is your connection with your deep, seductive, feminine power? Because when you're connected with that, everything kind of, bam, expands out from there.
Yeah.
When you are seated in your power and you know who you are and you're willing to look at your mirrors, then everything else does genuinely flow with that. So you are not desirable because you're not being touched by your partner. That's a story that's in your head, that you're wanting more of that awakening, but you're looking to someone else to awaken you. But someone can never awaken you. You've got to awaken yourself.
But, you can certainly be forgiven for thinking that because, that's how we're socialised. It's never about looking within first. It's always about looking outside.
Sure.
Like if you think about every magazine that we ever read growing up, every movie that we've ever watched, it's always about, you being saved or desired or validated by somebody else. It's very rarely about first starting within.
Yeah, it's true. Although I think some of the most profound movies, I think about... anyway, yes, but that's a podcast for another time, actually, is movies where women have self-awakened, because I think that they do exist, but we see them in more of a story of she's the rebellious woman that doesn't fit into society's norms and she finds and forges her own path.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of that story, which is essentially what looking within is. But I'm wanting you to take it a step further and look at feminine power, which is... seduction in action. How can you be seduced by your world and by yourself every day? Because when that happens, you can't be resisted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and I'm not even meaning sexually. Just there's a glow about a woman that's
that magnetism.
It is that magnetism. So one is, how is your connection with your body and with yourself? And after kids. We did a podcast on that recently. What was that called? Who Are You After Kids?
Yeah, after babies.
After kids, there's so much dust that needs settling on who you are and where you're headed. And I have such compassion for that, because that is a fucking hard journey and one that doesn't seem to end, I think. But... have the room for who are you as the woman, because it's going to take some time to rediscover who she is, because she's changed so much. She's gone through so many rites of passages. Her body's changed. Her connection to her body's changed. There might be trauma that's sitting there that needs addressing. Like, there's a lot of layers of stuff sitting there before you even get to the point of sharing that with another on a really deep, safe
because it's enormous vulnerability. You've first got to own it within yourself and first of all see it before you can begin to own it, before you can then be vulnerable enough to share it often.
100%.
Particularly with a partner who, I think sometimes a lot of women, and I've had up to this year before, Jules, sometimes I find it easier to talk about some of this really deep stuff with my girlfriends more than I do with my husband, just because I have this sense, and this is my stuff, right, that they can hold the space for some of this stuff better than he can. So there's often an enormous vulnerability that's underlying going there, because there is so much that you've built together and that you're connected by, and there's a depth of love that, if we were to see the depth of love that's right there with our partners, it would almost bring us to tears, because it's so profound. It can't not be for us to have weaved these lives together and created families and created dreams and brought them into reality. That has to be there in some form, even if for some couples, even if it is covered in cobwebs and, shit. It's there. It's just getting to the gold. Yeah,
you've got to dig it away a little sometimes, don't you? So there's that. And then I think the other facet is how do you actually physically start the process of getting back in love with your husband? And I will never forget, I was studying naturopathy and I had this lecturer. At one stage he said to this classroom, and it's stuck in my head, right? What is the key to a successful marriage? We're all throwing out stuff, sex, money, da-da-da-da-da-da. And at the end of it, she said, nah, none of those things. It's time. And it stuck in my head, and I thought, you are so right. And I have said to clients over the years, if you are choosing to clean the house over spending time with your husband, because that's all the time you've got, it is worth paying someone to clean the house. Yeah. Because the key to growing together is spending time together. The key to feeling seductive, sexy, and loved up is spending time together. So the path to an intimate relationship is a lot to do with how much time, downtime, do you spend with them. Now, that can be child-free, or it can include kids.
Yeah.
But it's not housework at home. It's playing a board game at home with everybody. It's going outside for a walk to the park. It's taking the dog for a bike ride. It's going to the movies. It's a loved up enjoyment time.
Yeah.
It's not functioning time.
Yeah, it's not going through the motions kind of time.
No.
It's actually intentional activity of
Because,
spending time
exactly,
together.
because when you see your partner interacting with your kids, interacting with you, joking or whatever, you get these flicks of who they used to be. You get these sparks of, there you are.
It's like when you
That's what I love about you.
It's like when you go out with your husband,
Yes.
and you see them around other people.
Yeah.
You know,
you
it's
start
like,
to see them
oh.
through their lens. Yeah.
It's just
Totally.
it's just those little things you need to do sometimes just to reignite that spark and just remind yourself.
Yes. So it's time. And we joke about this. We throw out date night, right? Like it's a cosmic joke these days.
Yeah.
But it's genuinely necessary to sustain a really great relationship.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have babysitting on tap, like I think is probably more common these days than not. But my husband and I have started a ritual of we call it a carpet picnic. So once the kids are in bed, and we generally put them to bed early on those nights, we set up our lounge and we lay it with, layers and layers and layers of pillows and doonas and blankets. And we set up candles, more candles than you need. And we sit and have antipasto and wine on the floor with no TV or anything on. Although sometimes we might watch a movie if we feel like cuddling on the floor and watching a movie, but it doesn't have to be date night,
Yeah.
with needing babysitting and, not having the kids. So time, I think. Second is communication, which you touched on.
Yeah.
So the ability to actually say the stuff that you don't want to say, that's a little bit yucky, but being able to say it in a way that is productive, in a way that speaks about your vulnerability as opposed to coming out of defensive-ness or wounding. I'm going to get you first before you even have a chance to get me.
And in a way that's respectful, language.
Yes. So I would really recommend that you seek, we could do that on another podcast, but I recommend that you seek help and guidance for communication if that's really a big issue for you. I always start with an I statement. So I'm feeling really when you and this is really what I would like. So it's about naming your emotion. So when this is happening, I'm feeling, and be careful about what the emotion is, that it's really a true hit the nail on the head emotion. And then the vulnerability comes afterwards. So not only stating how that's feeling and what a cause and effect that is, but what is it that you actually really want? Because that's the kicker, is most likely that person doesn't have those skill set. They don't know exactly that when you're raging and hurt and you slam the door and you tell them to fuck off and you don't want anything to do with them anymore, that what you really want is for them to chase after you, grab you and hold you. Because your actions aren't demonstrating that unless you tell them that's what you want. They don't actually know.
And we expect them to be mind readers.
We expect them to be mind readers. So there's point number 2. The greatest lesson I ever got was years, I think after the birth of must have been after my second. My husband and I went for a marriage checkup. We did a 6-week thing with a psychiatrist. And one of the best tips I ever got from her was speaking my brain. So my husband would say or do something and my brain's already gone, and I've already done these circuits of 1,000 different things that now means, and conversations and outcomes and possibilities. And 5 seconds later, I've already decided that he's an asshole and this whole thing's fucked. And, I'm undesirable and useless or whatever. I had already done 1,000 different layers of head processing and he's still on the fact that he didn't want to go for a walk. I don't know, whatever the thing was, you know. And in his mind, it's genuinely what it is. But in my mind, because of my programming and my past and being female, I had already done a complete head trip. So the interesting thing for me was to get a reality check. I had to speak my brain. So in that moment, instead of going off in my head because I'm too scared about being vulnerable to speak what's really underlying, that I'm unworthy or I'm unattractive underneath all of those thought processes, is okay, well, so Nick would say something and then I would go, okay, well, now I'm thinking and honestly, I could now turn around and laugh at some of those facial expressions he would give me, like, what? Like, he had no concept whatsoever about where I'd gone or what I thought what he said or did meant. None. Like, talk about reading between the lines.
Yeah.
He was on a entirely different path to what I had already decided it was on. And it was the best tool I ever got. Fuck, it was hard because at the start, speaking my vulnerability and what my head was doing and how I felt was incredibly difficult. But the more I did it, the easier it got. And the less I did it, because I realised very quickly that it wasn't reality.
Yeah, that it was just your, projection.
It was my projection. Yeah. And so even, like, it's pretty rare now that happens, because it's amazing how much that's, with all the other work we've done, of course, but it's amazing how much just that tool alone has, I don't know what the word is, but balanced out my programming from my childhood and adolescence. My brain just doesn't do that anymore. There. Or if it does, I literally say to him, okay, well, now I'm thinking, or feeling, and he then has the opportunity to check in about where that's a reality or not, which I can tell you virtually 10 out of 10 times it's not reality. It's a projection, a visualization, a previous wounding that's taken me somewhere that isn't actually what's happening in my relationship right here and right now. So being able to give them the opportunity to reality check is really valuable for you and for them. And the toolkit. So I literally, you've got to remember, probably like most couple men that I've come across, my husband came from a family of not very good emotional communicators. Like, everything gets swept under the rug. So for him, he hasn't come with a toolkit. I'm female, grew up in a group of females. I had, whilst it was feisty, I had to some extent an ability to communicate. He didn't.
Yeah.
So I actually had to give him the toolkit. Sure, dream world, I would love the new age man who's rocked up and ultra sensitive and just knows what to say and can read my feelings and, is just so vibing me. But that is just not reality.
That's a bit of a fantasy.
It is a total fantasy. And so I literally had to give him the toolkit. So I literally had to get, again, here's the key word, vulnerable enough to say, when I, insert whatever, get angry, get upset, feeling cranky, whatever it is, even though I'm saying or doing whatever, I really want you to, here's the sentence, say this, do that, and then do this. I literally gave him a step-by-step toolkit. Yeah. And sentences. Oh my God, I gave him sentences. And if he's now, previously, probably the last 5 years, if he then has said something that I don't like, I will now, instead of getting angry, turn around to him and say, I don't like the way that you just said that. Here's what I need you to say. And then he says it to me and I go, okay, that's okay. You've learned and I'm now okay.
That is so funny.
But the thing is, you only have to give them the tools for them to be able to use it. If you're not seeing a professional, if he's come from a background with no emotional programming and he doesn't read the books and he doesn't speak to the friends like you do, where's that toolkit coming from? Yeah. You can't just expect that
they're gonna know what
it's
to do
just going to happen.
Yeah, totally.
So here's the hard work involved in a relationship, right? Is there's a huge amount of vulnerability involved in getting real about what's going on, workshopping how to move forwards, and feeling like that's validating and secure enough, because it might feel awkward when you start to do it. But let me tell you, a year down the track, it's going to be fucking amazing. I'm having all these epiphany moments in my head when I just think about something's happened and Nick says or does something now, and it's almost like I can hear a gasp almost with the mums at school, and they go, oh my God, my husband would never say that or do that. And I think, well, you know what? I've programmed that, because 10 years ago he wouldn't have either.
But he's becoming more skilled about reading your emotions. And
100%.
That's what it is.
100%. And in fact, there was an incident, I can't even think what it was now, several weeks ago. And I did have a whirlwind spin-off emotional moment, which is now fairly rare for me, but totally had one. And I totally knew I was having a tantrum. Totally, I think I might have even said to you, totally knew I was having a tantrum and didn't want to stop myself, so I just kept going with it. I was enjoying it. And previously, he probably would have just gone, and fired up, and it would not have gone well. He grabbed me in a bear hug and just held on to me, and I'm, fighting a little bit and and then all of a sudden said a few words, a few sentences, and I just melted. And then he said something else, and I just looked at him and I went, you just handled me. Like 100%.
So beautiful.
Read the situation, had the toolkit, employed it, and it utterly shifted me. Like, utterly shifted me. And it was such an epiphany moment for me where I was like, oh my God, I've dreamt of this seductive man who just knows how to handle me my whole life. And guess what? Here he is. It's taken years of training and years of vulnerability, but here he is. But the thing is, they don't just land that way, So I want to say, have faith, be vulnerable, keep going.
And on that theme of comparison that I mentioned earlier on, I think too, when we compare not only who they are with somebody who we think they should be, it's also the way that they show love. Because I don't know if you're familiar with that 5 love languages kind of whole idea.
Yeah.
Especially when there's kind of key milestones. Perhaps it's somebody else is doing all this stuff for their partner, and they're so romantic, and they go out and do this dinner, and they have that Valentine's Day.
Yes.
My husband and I did really buy each other presents.
Yeah.
He shows his love through service.
Acts of service.
And I'm so used to it now that I often take it for granted. But it's beautiful, right? But he's not the present buyer. If I was to judge his love based on the kind of presents he gave me, and I only tell people about the fact that he doesn't really buy me presents, and that in fact he actually forgot Mother's Day, not long ago, people would think he was terrible, right? But he is the most giving man, but just not in the way that might be accepted,
I really like that too, is what is their language of love.
Yeah, because everyone has it, and everyone gives love and gives care to other people in line with what their true values are. Like my husband, even with our son, like he's made him the most elaborate, beautiful toys, because it's how he shows his love, is through making things and giving time and giving service. And when we can look at that in a person, it's just so profound to them, and that just it really opens your heart to them even more when you see that they're just giving their love in their form, and then we're all giving our love in our own form. Just really recognising that.
Yes, totally, 100%. Because it's not ever going to be the same as another person's form of love.
And it's just creating that dance that works between the two of you to see how each other communicates that.
Yeah. So the only other bit I think that's left, and we're not going to do it much justice now, we're already over time, but is intimacy. And it got me thinking about when I was training with Rhea Dempsey as a doula. She did this sex after parenthood course that I sat in on a couple of times. And the key theme I took out of that was, she's very funny, she stands up on this classroom, she goes, okay, so for the first 6 months post-birth, sure, you leave her alone, you let her do whatever she needs to do, let her have her time. But ladies, after 6 months, you just have to get back on that horse. You just have to give it up.
I love it.
And just do it, even if you're not feeling it. Because the thing is, with men, the longer they go without it, the more they want it. The longer women go without it, the less they want it. Theoretically, is how that's programmed. So there's something to that, I think, in that intimacy on a physical level creates intimacy further out than that. So for men, they often say they need the act to then feel huge amounts of intimacy. Women need intimacy before they need to do the act.
Yeah.
So I even have a couple of friends who have even worked that out. So, okay, you want sex, I need this. So you need to tell me in the morning, you need to somehow there's a conversation, a touch, how about later tonight, so that's on my head zone, so that I've got a little bit of my seductress hat on, not just mother hat on. And when you walk in the door, I then need an hour child-free time, and I need to have a shower, and I need to da-da-da. So, I've heard some women even map it out in terms of what they need to get into their seductress, because you can't often just go mum seductress. There often needs to be a series of steps in between. So working out what that is for you is really worthwhile. Knowing that there is something to sharing your body with the purpose of connecting with your husband. That at some point, if it's been a really long time, is what's getting in the way there? What's the vulnerability? What's the lack of desire and feeling and motivation that's there? Because it's not probably going to be their fault. No. It's probably going to be a dynamic and some really deep vulnerabilities and fears that once aired, supported, and time spent together on those will create such a huge shift that you will want to be part of that act. But sometimes, like Rhea says, sometimes you've just got to get back on the horse, break the drought to start your body awakening and opening to that process again, and doing things for yourself, buying new underwear instead of wearing your maternity bras for 3 years. You know, putting on a dress that you really like, the act of adornment, right? We've talked about that in another podcast too. Maybe it's a particular body cream for you. Maybe it's, a mantra. Maybe it's just saying to your husband, I need you to touch me more, or I need you to say that I'm beautiful every day, or, just the things you actually really need, you need to speak so that you are in a space for love expansion rather than contraction.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love all that. There's totally a whole podcast on that stuff.
Yeah, well, I totally want to start going there actually. But anyway, so I really hope that whilst we've sort of briefly skipped through a few things, that there's some points that have really hit home for you. And if there is anything that you really want us to expand on or you want to know more about, please private message us or put it on the Facebook page or anything along those lines so that we can best tailor our podcast for your lifestyle. Please share any of our podcasts with your friends or tribe if they're really calling to you. You can visit us on Facebook at Nourishing the Mother and Instagram. You can see Bridget at suburbansandcastles.com, and your January movie is...
Yes, it's called Awake, so it's all about the introduction of yoga to the West, and it's going to be a great event. We've got a yoga class beforehand, we've got some delicious food, and it's going to be great to kick off to our year of events.
Delicious.
Yes. And what about you?
Yes, you can connect with me at thepleasurenutritionist.com on Facebook, the web, and Instagram. And we have our next retreat coming up in March 5th and 6th. So if you would really like an opportunity to spend some one-on-one with us, expand what's happening in your life, and look at where you can create some really big shifts, then this is 2 afternoons really not to miss.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.